Hello and welcome to another Squeaky Chum tutorial. It has been a while, but I hope you are all safe and I hope you are all well. So in this tutorial, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today we're going to be experimenting with some polymer clay. And if you are familiar with my channel, you'll know that I normally do a lot of things with paper and we make beads out of paper. But today we're going to follow a very similar process, but we're going to be using polymer clay. So this is what we're going to be making. So stay tuned. I'm going to show you exactly how we make them. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave your comments below. I'd love to hear if you have used polymer clays before, if you would like to see more of these videos. I really do enjoy reading your comments. And also I do have a Facebook page, so I will leave the link in the description below. But without further ado, let's get started. So what are you going to need in order to make your beads? Well, you're going to need some Fimo clay, and I've got three different varieties here. I've got some Fimo Professional, I've got some Fimo Effect, and I've got some Super Sculpty, and the one I've got here is the Living Doll one. Fimo Professional, rather, is a really hard clay. It is quite difficult to work with and to condition. The Fimo Effects is probably the next most difficult, whereas the Super Sculpty I find is the easiest to work with. You can buy it in larger blocks and it is easy to cut and it is easy to condition. Your knife is just going to go straight through it. And you can see here how much softer it is to use it. And I remember years ago buying Fimo clay and your fingers would just be absolutely knackered before you'd even started making the clay because you'd have to condition it. If you do have a pasta machine though, you are going to find the conditioning much easier. What I do find though with Super Sculpty is that actually you need to do a lot of conditioning. So the choice is entirely yours as to what Fimo clay you purchase. You can see this bead I'm showing you here. This has been made with a Super Sculpty and I haven't actually painted it at all yet. So it's in its kind of naked form, so to speak. But that's the kind of results that you can get with Super Sculpty. The next bead I'm going to show you is one that I have made with the Fimo Professional. So you can see that at the end of it, there's not really a lot of difference. You just need to find a variety of polymer clay that you like to work with and that you can get. Don't be put off by the colour, because you can change that colour, you can add colour to it, you can paint it, you can do whatever. So if you found some really horrible brown stuff, feel free to crack on and use it. Use that horrible stuff up and we can make those beads pretty. Okay, let's get on to the next bit. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that you can use in order to create some textures on your clay. And I always like to use things that I have available, such as a pencil. You can create lines, you can create dots, you can create sort of divots in your bead. Also have a really good look round for any other interesting textures, such as a pen might have some ridges on it, the sort of top of the pen. You might also want to use something like this clay tool. You might have some of these in your sort of crafting stash, and it's got a really nice texture to it, which is just going to add an extra depth to your beads. I also have one of these butane torches for using with resin. I'd like to say I use it in the kitchen, but that would be a complete and utter lie. But if you have a look at it, it's got a really nice texture to it. So that would be a really good way of adding some additional textures to your bead. Also think about your paper beads. If you are one of my paper bead followers, you could also use the texture of the paper bead on your polymer clay to add another interesting texture. So have a little scout round your house and see whether you can find any interesting textures. So in order to create consistent beads, you're going to need to make yourself a template. So grab yourself a piece of card and a pencil, and if you want to use a ruler, feel free. I am just going to use the other side of the blade cutter. So do be careful of your fingers. I'm not going to measure anything today. I'm just going to do it by eye. I like that whole non-measuring vibe. It's I just think it makes it so much easier for people to have a go at something rather than being worried about measurements. So what I've done is I've drawn a line across. I would estimate it's about 1 inch across. If you have a look, this is the size of the bead roughly that I'm going to make. And once you've made your template, all your beads will be the same size. So I've drawn a line across, and what I need to do is I now need to divide it into 2 sections, because the top section needs to be a rectangle. This is going to provide you a good base for your bead. So you're going to have a rectangle section at the beginning, which will then taper into the bicone part of the bead. So that's going to be your first section. So have a go at like estimating how much you think you might need. But I would guess that that is in inches. That's probably about 1.5 inches and maybe about sort of 3-4 centimetres. Then probably 3 times the length of your first section, you're going to draw another line. You're going to mark the middle of it. And now we're going to draw a triangle. So you're just going to join up your points to create a triangle. Really easy, really simple, no maths involved, no complicated measuring, just nice and simple. If you are not good at drawing, or if you are not good at just sort of estimating these things, feel free to use something like Word to draw a rectangle and a triangle and join them together. So I'm just marking off the area here, which is going to become our template, and then all you need to do is chop it out. And here you can see I've got one that I've prepared earlier, and as you can see, that the second time I've made it, the measurements are slightly different. Am I worried? Not even remotely, because it's a template and it's just something that's going to help you make your beads. So let's get started on making our beads. I have rolled out this clay on my pasta machine after I've conditioned it, and you can see that it is on quite a thin setting. So this is where you have complete control over how thick your beads are going to be or how thin they're going to be. I've gone for quite a thin roll on my pasta machine because I don't want my beads to be huge. So I've just sliced a straight line across, and I'm going to use my blade. Be careful of your fingers, as I'm just about to chop my nail off, but be careful of your fingers and use your template to chop out your beads. So holding it nice and still, and I reckon we could probably fit maybe about 3 on this particular piece. We could probably cut more if I was being a little bit economical, but for the purposes of today, I'm just going to cut 3. And this is the beauty of having a template that you've made. You know that every single bead that you make is going to be the same. It's going to be the same dimensions, and it's going to be the same widths and shape. Super easy. So we'll get just one more out of this, and then we will get on to rolling. Do be careful with those blades, and don't put the knife up the wrong way. I mean, they are sharp and you could cut yourself, so do be careful. But they're not like if you've ever used one of those rotary cutters with fabric, which are super sharp. They aren't quite that sharp, so just be careful. And if you're doing this activity with children, maybe help them cut the beads out. So just make sure you've got nice points to your ends, which is always going to make your beads a lot nicer. So just make sure your beads are nice. Take off the excess clay that we aren't going to need. You can reuse that again in a minute. And now you have got 3 identical beads ready to roll. So for this, I'm going to use a skewer. I'm just going to use a plain old simple skewer. Keep it nice and simple, and again, it's something that you are likely to have in your house. You could use a knitting needle, a crochet hook, something like that. So don't feel you need to go out and purchase lots of new equipment. So you're going to put your bead starting at the large rectangle. Just take your time, don't rush, and we're going to roll that rectangle first. And that is going to give you a really nice base to your bead. And you're going to make sure your ends are lined up. So you can see I've got some nice ends that are lining up. And then as we roll, we're going to roll so that the tip of our piece of Fimo clay comes to the middle. So if you've watched any of my paper beading tutorials, you'll know that this is exactly the same as what we do when we make our bicomb paper beads. So you're just going to roll slowly, making sure that your roll in the middle. Now, Fimo clay does react slightly differently to paper in that it can move. Paper tends to stay where it is, but Fimo clay can stretch. So just be careful as you are rolling that it doesn't twist itself or stretch itself out of shape. So we're going to start on the next one, and you can make another one on the same stick. So that's another great thing about using these sticks, is you can just add another one. So again, just rolling up, just taking your time. There's absolutely no reason to rush for this. Just take your time and roll. Crafting is all about having fun, enjoying yourself, a bit of mindfulness as well. There we go, we've got 2 beads done, 1 more to go. Again, just pop it on, just press it down very slightly. Don't want to squash it on, but you want it to slightly adhere to the stick. So swash it on and roll, just rolling nice and straight. Use your fingers to create that texture, not texture, but, to create the tension between the stick and the clay so that it all sticks down in a nice, even way. And just roll the bead as you go, roll the stick, and there we go. 3 beads all made. There we go. That was nice and easy, wasn't it? Let's move on to the next bit. So let's talk about surface texture, and there are various ways that you can do this. So one of them is to add texture to your clay before you cut out your bead. And so here you can see I have marked where my bead is going to be cut out from. And I'm then going to add texture to that before I roll the bead up. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this bead clay tool. It's got these nice metal sort of cutouts on, like machine turned cutouts. And when you roll it on the clay, it's going to create a nice surface texture. And you can just about see it there. Now I can see that I am stretching the clay. So you just need to be careful that you're not making the clay even thinner, or you're not going to have thin and thick sections. So just be careful when you're rolling. You can go backwards and forwards, but you just want to create an overall texture to your bead. And if you feel like you've missed any areas, just pick your tool up and roll it over. And this creates a really nice texture. So once you're done, you might find that you need to re-cut out your bead again, because you may have squished it slightly. But that's okay, that's not a problem. It's better to cut it again, and so you get a consistent bead. So I'm going to use my handy little template, and I'm going to use my knife cutter or my blade, and I'm going to re-cut out my bead. Again, keep your fingers out the way, being really careful. Always pop those bits of clay to one side and you can reuse them. One of the really good things about polymer clay is that it doesn't dry out in the air. So if you've ever had a go at using air dry clay, you know that you've constantly got to keep all those bits that you're not using covered, or even real clay is exactly the same. Polymer clay, on the other hand, you can leave it sitting there for 24 hours, and when you come back, it's pretty much going to be in the same condition that it was. You might find it has dried out very slightly, but not really. So you can still use it. It's not like an air dry clay. So we're going to get our little skewer again, and we're going to pick up our textured bead strip, and you can see that texture on here really nicely. So flip it over, and we'll just start the beading rolling process all over again, just to create a different type of bead. And just rolling up, keeping it nice and straight. Again, there's no rush to this. And I can see that it has slightly split, but I'm not worried, because you can see that actually the end result is quite pretty. But polymer clay is very forgiving, so if you find that you do have some cracks in it, don't worry, you can just use a paintbrush, or you can use your nail or something that you've got in the house just to squash it back together again. And that's one of the things that I really like about polymer clay, is that you can just easily fix any errors. There we go, pretty much sorted. So going back to our 3 beads that we've made, there are a variety of ways that you can add texture to your beads once you have rolled your beads. So if we look at this bead that I made earlier and that has already been through the oven, you can see that it's got little ridges on, and I made those with the end of that pen. So today, for these beads, I'm going to use a pencil, and you could use something like a skewer, a knitting needle, or a paintbrush, anything that's got a point on it. You could even use something like a darning needle, anything that's going to create a little divot in your bead. And I'm just going to work my way around the bead, just adding little dots, really simple, until I get back to the beginning again. And then I can do exactly the same on all the other beads. So again, take your time, there's no rush, just have a little bit of think about what it is you would like to create on your beads. You can make them all the same, or you can experiment and try something different. That's one of the things I love about this polymer clay, because if you feel like you have made a bead and you really hate it, then before you cook it, if you really don't like it, you can just take it off, squish it, and make a new bead. So there's no waste really, because you can just squash it and try again. So once I've got to the end of doing those 3 beads with the dots, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just smush my beads up, and you can see how easy they move on the bamboo skewer, so they're not stuck down. And I'm going to use the end of this pen, just lightly pushing in to the clay, going round in a circle to create these really interesting ridges and surface textures. And because they are a spiral, you can just keep working round until you get to the end. And then you're going to need to repeat the process on the other side, if that's what you choose to do. Remember, you can customise these beads to however you like. And you'll notice that very slightly squashed the bead as I was doing it. And again, does it matter? Not at all. We can easily fix that. Good old nail comes in handy. Just squash it back down, good as new. I think it's really important for you to see that mistakes are made and that accidents happen, because you know, quite often on YouTube videos, people edit out the errors, they edit out the things that don't go quite right. And sometimes that can leave you feeling a bit like a failure when you're having a go at doing something and yours doesn't go quite the way that everyone else's does, because what they've done is they've edited out their errors. But I think it's important to leave them in because, you know, that's the beauty of crafting, is that sometimes it doesn't go 100% right, and sometimes, you know, we do make mistakes, but we can easily sort them out. And has it affected the bead? Not at all. So there we go. There is my bead. And what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that on all of the other beads. If you know me, then you will have seen these mica powders before, and you will know that I love them. They come in an enormous box, and I will leave a link to them in the description box below. I got mine from Amazon. And what we're going to do is we are going to add some more surface decoration to our beads. And just watch what happens when I add this mica powder to our surface markings that we have done. So you don't need a lot, just a bit, and you're just going to brush it on, and you can see that I'm just literally whizzing it around. And you can add a little bit, you can add lots, and you just work it in without changing the surface of your beads. So you don't want to push too far that you are making new indents in, but you can really work that powder in. Now you can do this before you cook the beads, or you can do it afterwards. I'm doing this before. I'm going to go back and find a little bit more powder, add a little bit more. And you can see that it really just adds even more dimension to your beads, because you can see the areas where I have done it and I have not done it. And it just adds a really nice sheen. I think actually, although the mica powder was a pale pink, I think actually it's kind of almost given like a two-tone look to it, in that there was almost a bit of a grey undertone. So you can see the difference in the two beads now, from the bead where I've added mica powder and the bead where I haven't added mica powder. And I think it looks really good. On to our next bead, and for this one I'm going to use this really beautiful gold colour mica powder, and I'm going to use a different paintbrush, because what you want to make sure is that you're not cross-contaminating them. So I'm going to open this up, and again with mica powders, and when you're adding anything to this, and it's worth just noting as well that if you don't have mica powders, don't worry, you could have a go with eyeshadows. So always have a little raid of your makeup and see if you can find any interesting eyeshadows. But it's worth just noting that it's always good to err on the side of caution when you're using these, and a little bit goes a long way. But what you can't do is it's hard to take back what you've put on. So start with a little and add layers. So you can see I didn't have a lot on my paintbrush, but I've added a bit, and now I can go back and add a little bit more. So you can see I've added more, and I'm just really brushing this over, and look at the difference that has made to that bead. Now it's got almost a metallic look to it that could almost have been made with some kind of metal that has been wound up. And so let's look at the three beads together. So we've got one bead that's been coated with a pale pink mica. We've got one bead that's been coated with a gold mica powder, and then we've got our original bead. So you can see how much difference adding these powders makes to your beads. Okay, so let's look at our last bead that we haven't done anything with. So I'm just going to move the others out of the way. And what I'm going to use is one of these dotting tools that you can get from, you can pick them up in Poundland and places like that. But these are ones that I did buy specifically for clay. But they are quite often used for nail art and things like that. So I'm going to use that, and I'm actually going to use it on the side to create this kind of mushroomy type, sort of microphony, I don't really know what shape kind of texture, but again, it's a fun texture. It's something slightly different. It's it's just playing around with what you've got and creating something interesting. And if someone was looking at these beads, they would never look at it and go, I think that was created by a sidewards dotting tool. So just have fun and just experiment. And if you don't like it, just take it off and re-squish the clay and make a new bead. But just have fun creating something unique and original, and that is yours. That is your creation. So I think for this bead, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do different things on each side. So I've done that pattern on one side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a different one of my clay making tools. But again, you could do this with a knitting needle or something else, or a pin. I'm going to create some sort of more spirally ridges going round. So I'm just going to push into the clay. Again, I don't really know how this is going to turn out. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but that's the fun of creating and experimenting. So I'm using the tool and I am rolling the bead at the same time. So I've kind of got both hands on the go. And I am liking this texture. I'm liking this surface. It's almost like a sort of corkscrew. So I'm going to take it all the way to the end. There we go. I like that surface texture. Just making sure I continue it all the way to the start. And then you can just go back and just change any bits that you're not quite happy with. So for this bead, I'm going to use yet another one of my mica powders, this lovely kind of aqua-y, bluey, greeny colour. And I think you might be able to guess that it is one of my favourite colours from the fact that my nails are the same. So again, you don't need loads, err on the side of caution, just load your paintbrush with some. And then, I mean, this is a very big contrast to the colour of the bead. The others have been quite subtle, but I think you'll agree that when you add this to this bead, it really does pop. The colours really do pop. And because it doesn't get into the recesses, you can really see those more. You can see the contrast between the two colours. And again, I just love that effect of the difference between the highs and the lows. We're just creating something that wasn't there yesterday. This bead wasn't there 10 minutes ago. We've just created this. This is our creation. And if you find that you've perhaps put a little bit too much too much mica powder on your bead, well, this is an easy way to get rid of it. I've just spritzed a little bit of alcohol onto a paper towel, and this is actually one that I use for cleaning my nails when I use when I use my gel polishes. And I've just been able to remove some of the powder that was just a little bit too thick. So again, I've left in my errors because I want to show you that if you make these errors just like I did, you can easily fix it. And there we go. There are our 3 beads made out of polymer clay and some mica powder. Now all that's left to do is to just cook them in the oven, and you need to follow the instructions that are on the packaging. Cook them for the required length of time. Just bear in mind that your beads are quite thin, so they may not need the full amount of time, but once they are cooked, you can then glaze them.